Good morning everyone. Basa na tayo ng Bible guys. 2 Chronicles chapter 10, 11, and 12 and John chapter 11 verse 30 to 57. Dito muna tayo sa John. Nagmamando din tayo. Nagkamali kasi ako kanina. Basa. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went up, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. Binuhay si Lazarus. Verse 39, Jesus once more deeply moved came to the tomb. It was a cave, with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. Patay na ng 4 na araw, guys. Nalibing na ng 4 na araw. Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out. His hands, wait lang. His hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Religious leaders plot to kill Jesus. Therefore, sa verse 45 guys, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. 47. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. Wait lang. Pinagpapawisan na pati ilong ko. Yung nagawa ko kasi ang ingay-ingay ng electric fan. Kaya sabi ko sa inyo pagka nakabukas yan hindi maganda pakinggan yung mas malakas pa yung electric fan kaysa voice ko. Nandito na tayo sa ulitin natin yung verse 45 guys. Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is the man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our house and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up, "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people, than that the whole nation perish." So verse 51, he did not say this on his own, but the high priest that year. He prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day in the plotted So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the Jews. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the desert to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple area, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the feast at all?" But the chief priests and Pharisees had given orders that if anyone found out where Jesus was, he should report it so that they might arrest him. Yung chan ko. So that they might arrest him. Ayun, hanggang dyan lang tayo. Bukas na yung chapter 12. Dito na tayo sa 2 Chronicles chapter 10, 11, and 12. The Northern Tribes. Mabasa. Yung pawis ko, grabe na guys. The Northern Tribes revolt. Israel rebels against Rehoboam. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all the Israelites had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam son of Nebat heard this, he was in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt, so they sent for Jeroboam, and he and all Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor, and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Come back to me in 3 days." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders. Sorry guys, nagmamadali na kasi. Malapit na kasi yung work. Kaya, pasensyahan nyo na para tayong kinakarera ng basa. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and all Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." So verse 5, Rehoboam answered, "Come back to me in 3 days." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If you will be kind to these people and please them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "Tell the people who have said to you, 'Your father put heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist.'" So, ibig sabihin, mas makapal daw yung daliri niya kaysa baywang ng tatay niya. "My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with the scorpions." Ay, talaga lang. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." Alam nyo guys, malilito kayo sa Jeroboam at sa Rehoboam. Ang tatandaan nyo lang, pag Rehoboam is, yun yung king. Jeroboam, yun yung mga nagre-rebelde. 3 days, sa verse 12, 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." The king answered them harshly, rejecting the advice of the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." Sa verse 15. So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from God to fulfill the word of the Lord, the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam son of Nebat through Ahijah the Shilonite. When all Israel saw the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesus' son? To your tents, O Israel." Look after your own house of David. Si Jesse, tatay ni David. Tinatandaan talaga yung family tree, guys. Look after your own house, O David. So all the Israelites went home, but as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but the Israelites stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Ayan, up to now pala. The house of David to this day. Sa chapter 11 na tayo. When Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, he mustered the house of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 fighting men to make war against Israel and to regain the kingdom for Rehoboam. But this word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, the man of God. Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the Israelites in Judah and Benjamin, this is what the Lord says, do not go up, fight against your brothers. Tino magkakamag-anak na kasi yan, guys. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing. So they obeyed the words of the Lord and turned back from marching against Jeroboam. Rehoboam fortifies Judah. So verse 5 ng chapter 11. Rehoboam lived in Jerusalem and built up towns for defense in Judah: Bethlehem, Etam, Tekoa, Bethzor, Soko, Adulam, Gad, Marishah, Zip, Adorim, Lachish, Azekah, Zorah, Aijalon, and Hebron. These were fortified cities in Judah and Benjamin. He strengthened their defenses and put commanders in them with supplies of food, olive oil, and wine. He put shields and spears in all the cities and made them very strong. So Judah and Benjamin were his. The priests and Levites from all their districts throughout Israel sided with him. The Levites even abandoned their pasture lands and property and came to Judah and Jerusalem because Jeroboam and his sons had rejected him as priest of the Lord, and he appointed his own priest for the high places and for the goat and calf idols he had made. Those from every tribe of Israel who set their hearts on seeking the Lord, the God of Israel, followed the Levites to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices to the Lord, the God of their fathers. They strengthened the kingdom of Judah and supported Rehoboam, son of Solomon, 3 years, walking in the ways of David and Solomon during this time. History of apostasy and reform, Rehoboam's family. Sa verse 18, Rehoboam married Mahalath, who was the daughter of David's son Jeremoth, and Abihail, A-B-I-H-A-I-L, the daughter of Jesus' sons Eliab. She bore him sons Jeus, Shemariah, and Zaham. Then he married Maacah, daughter of Absalom, who bore him Abijah, Attai, Ziza, and Shelomith. Rehoboam loved Maacah, daughter of Absalom, more than any of his other wives and concubines. O, mas mahal niya si Maacah, guys. In all, he had 18 wives and 60 concubines, 28 sons and 60 daughters. Napakarami talaga nilang asawa nung araw, guys. Paligsahan sila ng paramihan. Kaya lang ang tanong, paano kaya nila magagampanan ng katulad niyan, mas mahal niya si Maacah. It's so unfair sa ibang asawa, diba? Shishak attacks Jerusalem. After Rehoboam's position as king was established and he had become strong, nasa chapter 12 na tayo. He and all Israel, parang marathon. Kaya ko pala magbasa ng ilang chapter ng ilang minuto lang. Ayun, 14 minutes pa lang tayo. Pagka yung paspasan, kasi nagmamadali na nga sa oras. Sa chapter 12, Shishak attacks Jerusalem. After Rehoboam's position as king was established and he had become strong, he and all Israel with him abandoned the law of the Lord because they had and faithful to the Lord. Shishak, king of Egypt. Oh, king of Egypt is Shishak, guys. Attacked Jerusalem in the 5th year of King Rehoboam with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen, and the innumerable troops of Libyans, Sukkites, and Cushites that came with him from Egypt. He captured the fortified cities of Judah and came as far as Jerusalem. Then the prophet Shemaiah came to Rehoboam and to the leaders of Judah who had assembled. Wait lang guys, at ako yun. Diyan tayo sa verse 5 ha. Grabe yung pawis. Wait lang. Ayusin natin. Basa na agad. Nawala na. Ang hirap din ng pinagpapawisan ka ng todo. Pati ilong. Pati ilong pinagpapawisan. Diba? 16 minutes na pala tayo. Then the prophet Shemaiah, sa verse 5 guys. Then the prophet Shemaiah came to Rehoboam and the leaders of Judah who had assembled in Jerusalem for fear of Shishak. And he said to them, "This is what the Lord says, you have abandoned me, therefore I now abandon you to Shishak." When the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, this word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, "Since they have humbled themselves, I will not destroy them, but will soon give them deliverance. My wrath will not be poured out on Jerusalem through Shishak. They will, however, become subject to him, so that they may learn the difference between serving me and serving the kings of other lands." When Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem, he carried off the treasures of the temple of the Lord and treasures of the royal palace. He took everything, including the gold shield Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made bronze shield to replace them and assigned this to the commanders of the guard on duty at the entrance of the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the Lord's temple, the guards went with him, bearing the shields, and afterward they returned them to the guard room. Because Rehoboam humbled himself, the Lord's anger turned from him, and he was not totally destroyed. Indeed, there was some good in Judah. King Rehoboam established himself firmly in Jerusalem and continued as king. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city of the Lord had chosen out of all tribes of Israel in which to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite. He did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. So verse 15, as for the events of Rehoboam's reign from beginning to end, are they not written in the records of Shemaiah the prophet and of Iddo the seer that deal with genealogies? There was continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Rehoboam rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and Abijah his son succeeded him as king. So hanggang dyan na lang guys. Kita mo pagka mabilisan, paspasan tayo. Tapos agad. Bye everyone. God bless.